Are we starting?
Yeah, just in a second. Is it team AA-Dhaar or Aadhaar?
Well, Aadhaar is just AA is for the account aggregator.
Yep. Okay, guys, we're back with our next team, Team Aadhaar. They are about to present, so they have 12 minutes. Good luck, guys. Over to you.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. This is Team Aadhaar, and we present to you our virtual data room solution called Dart VDR. This is the team. It's me, Palash, Darshan, Saikat, and Kunal. As you can see, we're geographically distributed across different time zones, and we came together for this hackathon. What's a virtual data room in an AA framework? So Dart VDR is our solution. The FIU brings their algorithm, and then they can run data. They can process data in a secure, isolated environment. No sensitive information exchanges hands, and no data is stored in the Dart VDR. In a traditional data room, you can have portable digital devices, but they're not powerful enough to run complex algorithms. Dart VDR can be scaled to support such use cases. Our proposal is that the virtual data room service be inside the AA in the framework. The AA is the most trusted entity in the entire AA framework. RBI regulations prevent AA from accessing the data, and these regulations hold in our proposed virtual data room solution. We also propose that a new consent type called virtual data room be created, along with the existing ones called store, query, stream, and view. This will allow for much more granular, limiting the data access. The process would be the FIU sends a zip file with their proprietary algorithm, and the Dart VDR saves the algorithm, and it can be run multiple times once it's created. The proprietary algorithms can fetch data only from an allowed list of providers. So, for example, OneMoney, FinView, and other AAs. The Dart VDR can only return responses in an approved format, like Booleans or a predefined list of items, and no personally identifiable information is leaked out in that way. There are two important concepts in our framework. The first one is functions. Functions is basically just the code that is submitted by the FIU. Currently, we support the AWS Lambda spec, but in future, we plan to support Docker containers. The FIU is supposed to give us the runtime, so that's either Java, Python, etc., and an entry point to the function called the function handler. A valid JSON schema should also be passed in for response schema validation. These functions are reusable by the FIU in future. The next concept is jobs. Jobs are basically requests to process the data using the function already submitted. The FIU can schedule a job after the consent has been received by the customer. So the consent ID, the consent handle ID, and the AA ID need to be submitted as part of the job request. We provide a UI console, a command line tool for CI/CD, and REST APIs for integration. Here are some screenshots of the UI console. We'll be looking at that in our demos. The tech stack, we use AWS cloud services in the backend. We use Lambdas, we use S3, we use Fargate. For our front end is built on React and TypeScript, and the CLI is in Python. So going over to the live demo. Are you still able to see my screen?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So this is the UI console that would be hosted on the FIU side. As you can see, you see all the functions that have been submitted, and you can also see all the past jobs that have been created. So let me start by creating a function. Let me give it finvu live, and I need to enter JSON schema. So we limit the JSON schema to have only type Boolean or a string, and the string can only have a list of enums. Or if it's an object, then the additional property should be false. This prevents data from leaking out. So I enter that in here. I provide a handler for my function. I select the runtime as Java code. And the function that I'm selecting is basically just checking if the user has a balance of more than 4,000 rupees in their account. It's just a simple check. And if it's true, then it says has balance as true. So I submit the job. As soon as I submit, what happens is as soon as I create a function, a row is added to the table and an entry is created into the S3 bucket. As soon as the S3 bucket gets the code, creates a Lambda function for that particular code and schedules it. A status Lambda just checks for the status and updates the metadata table. And then when the create job comes in, we'll get to that. So if you can see, for my given Lambda, for this FIU, I have the finvu live available, and that corresponding function has been created in the Lambda 42 seconds ago. And if you go back to our UI, says it's still the status is still being created. That's because there's no way to get a feedback back. So we have a Lambda which checks the status and updates it. A job can only be created once this is green. So now that it's green, I go and create a job. The job can be created from the jobs list, or you can go to the function and click new job. So next step is to create the function for Finwu Live. Like I mentioned, we need to generate the consent. I have a helper method that helps me create the consent. So as you can see, it's requesting consent. I go in and pass in the consent for the user. See, there's a consent here. I have two bank accounts. One bank account has dummy data of 7 rupees. So in this case, my has balance should be false. Proved it. And it should generate the request parameters that I need to use. You can see the customer ID is passed in, the consent ID, the consent handle, and the date and time range needs to be passed in when creating a job. So now I trigger create job, and it's been submitted. From a diagram, we can see when the job is created, it adds a row in the database, and there's an executor lambda which checks on a cron if there's any pending job and schedules it in our private AWS Lambda. The code can make any outgoing calls, but it's limited by the domains it can hit that we control. We limit it to OneMoney, Finview, and Amazon, but more AA domains can be added. This limits sending data back to the FIUs and an abuse of data. Once the response is available, it updates the table, and the FIU can get the data using the get job details table. The same thing can be seen from the UI as well. So if I go back to jobs, you can see the Finvu Live has been created. The response is not obtained yet. It takes some time for it to pick up. I think it's a minute cron. You can also see the jobs created for a particular function, and they list the recent jobs here. As you can see, the current state is success, and it says has balance false. This was allowed because it matched our JSON schema. In interest of time, we have a malicious function that we have recorded, and Ariman can share that video next, where the request is denied if the response try to send user data or date of birth.
I'm stopping you.
Yep, thank you.
This is Team Aadhaar, and this is allowed. We apply these through it, as you can see.
Okay, so that's the malicious function. As you can see, it's trying to return the name, date of birth, and email.
Schedule to be created. After the function is created, you can create a new job.
The function has been created, and if you create a new job against it, and let's do the consent part.
And the job has been submitted. Now, because
the job has been created, fine.
We are hoping that the JSON schema
and malicious code.
When the response will come back.
Once you go to the job, it says it's failed because it failed the JSON schema validation. We also have an example for invalid JSON schema, like I mentioned. If you have just string and don't pass a list of predefined values, the function request will be rejected and say that JSON schema is invalid.
The same things can be achieved by a CLI.
We also have a CLI tool, so you can log in and provide FIU ID.
And you're already logged in, or you can submit a new FIU ID
and
on the UI.
You can list functions, create functions, and they should work in sync.
Create.
So this is really useful for a CI/CD solution for FIUs. They can also directly integrate with our APIs. And here I'm creating a function.
If I were to
As you can see, there's the test CLI Dart is the function that will be deployed.
Test CLI Dart is showing up.
And it's yellow. And once the deployment is complete, it should change to green.
Successful.
Our system design, we have 4 APIs, like I mentioned: get job, create function, get function details, create job, get job details that the FIUs can use. They hit the API. Once you create a function, it goes and updates the row in the metadata table. Number 2, and the code is stored in the input S3 bucket. Number 3. As soon as it lands there, it goes in as soon as it lands in the S3 bucket, the creator lambda picks it up and creates a private AWS lambda for that. As you can see, this was
And
demoed
updates
in
the
live,
status in the
and
postgres
updates
table.
a row in the metadata table.
Status lambda is
The
triggered
status
when
lambda
it
checks the status and
of a
updates if
newly
the
created
function is
lambda
ready,
function and
so
updates
that
it
the
in the
FIUs
table.
can then go and
The
schedule the
function
job.
status can be checked by calling the
Once
get
it's
function
ready,
details API. Once the
you can
function
get
is
the
ready
function details
and consent is obtained by the customer, the create job
and
API
get the
can be
consent
called
from the
to
user and
create a
create
new
job.
request job.
That creates a
A
new
new
row in
row
the
is added
metadata
to the
table,
postgres table. The
and the
executor
lambda
queries
then
the table
polls
periodically
for a
for a
pending
pending
job
job and calls the
and runs
corresponding
the
function in the
corresponding
AWS
job in the
Lambda
private
with the
AWS
job
Lambda.
parameters.
The
The
NAT
function can make
filter
outbound HTTP
is
calls
the one
to a
that
small list of allowed
protects, is
domains.
a forward proxy
No data is
and
stored or
prevents
accessed by the virtual data room.
access to
The
outgoing
data
domains.
acquired to perform
Once
the
the data is
request cannot be
available,
sent back
the
to the
JSON
requester.
schema is
On
validated
completion of
and the
execution
row is
or
updated in
failure,
the
the
metadata
executor
table with
lambda
the
validates the
result.
result against the JSON schema provided by the function and updates the row in the table.
And finally,
The
the
user of
FIUs
the
can
virtual
fetch the
data
data
room
using
can
get
call the
job
get
details.
job details API to check on the status of the job and retrieve
That's all
results.
we had. Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys. 3 minutes.
Very good ideas, folks. This is very cool. So it's clearly a solid improvement over the current scheme of things where data is shipped out to the FIUs. But I guess there's many practical difficulties with this, which I will encourage you to kind of think about. Clearly, the problem statement is here that you're trying to solve is that FIUs have proprietary algorithms and then there is the user data which is being shipped by AAs out.
Yep.
And at some point it gets decrypted and used by the algorithms. So some of the issues are technical and others might be kind of non-technical. Let me go over the non-technical ones that I think would be that many times for compliance reasons, you need not just the output, which is what you're trying to kind of control, but also the inputs to be stored to, let's say, a lending model, for example. And that kind of creates this problem of what is the data that you can hide. If you only be able to share the output of a yes no, then you can definitely hide the data. So in some cases there is that problem. On the technical side, the again there's a few issues there, but for such a thing to work, the models that an FIU would have needs to be decomposed so that it's so for example, let's say a model uses the credit bureau score as well in addition to the AA data. Now such a model will need to go access the bureau score from somewhere else, or you'll have to get the bureau scores along with the algorithm, which kind of needs you to puncture some holes in this secure enclave sort of environment that you're making.
Right.
Go ahead.
So so basically, so we have a allowed list of domains. If you were to get an experience score or credit score, we have to whitelist those entities that can be hit. The main aim was that the data does not go back to the FIUs, and because AA is a much more controlled environment, we can have whitelisted, trusted RBI regulated entities, domains whitelisted. So in that way, the code could potentially fetch data from any number of places. All we care about is the response that we are sending back. We also looked at homomorphic encryption and other strategies, and we looked at failure crypto system. We got it working, but then we just didn't get it working in the AWS Lambda scenarios. We also looked at enclaves and asilo framework from Google. That was it restricts access like even at the OS level, and only the code has access. And
the other issue is the issues that you see with Intel SGX and other platforms, that they're not as secure as we think, as we want them to, and there are hacks always happening. So actually the just homomorphic encryptions and other such encryptions are actually good in addition to these kind of secure enclaves type of solutions. But having said all that, definitely much better than the status quo. So good ideas. I think with more development, this is a very promising line of development.
Thank you, Pankaj.
Can take one more question from the judges, if there's anything.
Do you expect this to be used by FIU platforms or FIU organizations, FIU TSPs or FIU organizations? Who do you expect will use this?
I think it could be both. If there are TSPs which want to create modules on top of our APIs and provide it to the FIUs, that is possible. Or the FIUs can themselves register with us and use the APIs. So it could be either. As long as they get consent from the user and they have algorithms, they can create functions and schedule jobs.
Okay. Obviously, in a different forum, I would have follow-up questions, but I will refrain for now. But very good presentation, guys. I'm very impressed.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you very much. If there's any questions, I believe the emails are available, so we'd be happy to answer any more questions offline too.
Thank you. Yeah, and you can reach out to me in case you'd like to speak to any of the teams, and I can facilitate an intro. So thanks very much, Team Dhaar or Team Aadhaar. Great job, and I'll be taking you off stage. We'll be coming back in a few minutes with the next team, which is Team Kaleido Geeks. So everyone from Kaleido Geeks, please be ready to accept my invite.